So Ta-Nehisi Coates has a new book out where he's decided to take on the topic of Israel and the war in Gaza. And in a book that apparently has absolutely no nuance, really goes after Israel. I'm not surprised. I'm sure you guys are not surprised. And so he goes over on CBS Morning News to promote it. And Tony Dokoupil, who my understanding is his ex-wife is Jewish and lives in Israel with his few children. I think he has 3 children. So they live in Israel. He's now married to Katie Tur of MSNBC. But in any event, he's got a real 3 very good reasons to question false narratives around Israel. Really pressed him in a way that I thought was actually amazing. But he's taking all sorts of heat for it on the internet. Watch this.
I have to say, when I read the book, I imagine if I took your name out of it, took away the awards and the acclaim, took the cover off the book, the publishing house goes away, the content of that section would not be out of place in the backpack of an extremist. Why leave out that Israel deals with terror groups that want to eliminate it? Why not detail anything of the first and the second intifada, the cafe bombings, the bus bombings, the little kids blown to bits? And is it because you just don't believe that Israel, in any condition, has a right to exist?
Well, I would say the perspective that you just outlined, there is no shortage of that perspective in American media. The reporters of those who believe more sympathetically about Israel and its right to exist don't have a problem getting their voice out.
And it's what I struggled with throughout this book. What is it that so particularly offends you about the existence of a Jewish state that is a Jewish safe place and not any of the other states out there?
There's nothing that offends me about a Jewish state. I am offended by the idea of states built on ethnocracy, no matter where they are. I'm the child of Jim Crow. I'm the child of people that were born into a country where that was exactly the case of American apartheid.
Why is there no agency in this book for the Palestinians? They exist in your narrative merely as victims of the Israelis.
Either apartheid is right or it's wrong. It's really, really simple.
Okay. I'll just give you a sample of the blowback that Tony got for asking those questions. Abdallah Fayyad, who's a correspondent for Vox. The questions that one host asks are incredibly hostile, combative, and rude, telling Ta-Nehisi Coates that his new book wouldn't have any value were it not for the accolades he previously received. They're also cartoonishly racist, blaming Palestinians for their own oppression. Of course, not to be outdone, enter Mehdi Hasan. Insane first question from Dokoupil, suggesting Coates' book would be in the backpack of an extremist. Then the usual right to exist propaganda question, which Coates dismisses masterfully. Crystal Ball didn't like it either. First question accuses Coates of extremism, and rest of segment is spent insinuating he's an anti-Semite. Great stuff. Wajahat Ali. He's of the infamous Don Lemon clip that our audience may remember, where he's laughing at the Trump supporters as with their maps and their Ukraine, and that's Wajahat. Tony goes on an offensive attack against Coates, but there were 2 co-hosts there who literally said nothing and let him blather on incessantly, shameful stuff all around. Here's somebody from a social media publisher owned by Al Jazeera. The insane interrogation of Coates and the regurgitation of Israeli anti-Palestinian propaganda by this host makes sense when you learn that he is fully personally invested in the system of occupation, settler colonialism, and apartheid. And then she went on to call for CBS to reprimand Tony for those questions. Yes, would you like to take that one?
I want to take a few things here. Tony Dokoupil is a friend of mine. I didn't know Tony's opinion on Israel. That surprised me. Tony is a very fair interviewer. He's a straight up guy. He's somebody who is interested in getting to the truth, and he's not a super ideological guy. And they were all incredibly fair questions. I mean, why would those not be fair questions? Someone should be fired for asking tough questions of the great Ta-Nehisi Coates. Mm-hmm. The thing about Coates' book, and I have skimmed what's available to me, and I suspect it's now on sale. I think it was yesterday. And I will read it. But the incredible thing about it, there's a profile of him in New York Magazine. We did a very long segment on it in the fifth column. Is that he says that the conflict is simple. And this is not my interpretation of what he believes the conflict to be. It is what he says. I was shocked to find out that it was actually quite simple. No, it isn't. And, if you cannot bat away those questions, which are actually very important questions, I don't know where you get off speaking on this issue at all. I mean, Kmele pointed out and I'll let Kmele say this, but Kmele pointed out in our broadcast when we were talking about it, his constant invocation of something that is not anything like the current situation in Israel, which is race relations in America, which is Jim Crow and how he grew up in Baltimore. I don't know the relationship that has between a country that is desperate to survive and is surrounded on every single front with people that would like to see it die. I mean, I don't it's not a simple thing. And, also people saying like, oh, Tony he's invested settler colonialism. I'm pretty sure that his ex-wife and kids don't live in the West Bank, but that's the issue. These people believe the entire state of Israel is illegitimate and shouldn't exist. So, which was the question he asked Ta-Nehisi Coates, is there a problem that you have with the Jewish state in general? Rather than him saying no, he kind of says, yes, I do have it. But I have that, with everything. It's like, every time I've heard Ta-Nehisi Coates before this, he speaks through the prism of race. It surprises me that race offends him in this context.
Go ahead, Kmele.
Well, I mean, I'm more consistent on these matters, Moynihan. So I'll say that with Coates, I'm at least a little sympathetic to the argument that the notion of kind of ethnic identity as a cornerstone for any sort of national project is not something that I find particularly intriguing or interesting. But what I will say is I'm always a big fan of nuance, and the fundamental kind of motive force of Coates's work, both here and in other contexts, is to completely obliterate nuance and to insist that historic events, things that bring us to where we are today, that they're always simple, and that they're always simple in ways that are very convenient for him. They paint people, the particular characters, as the worst sort of monsters imaginable. They're always motivated by something that looks almost exactly like American Jim Crow or racism, and they're always animated by some sort of kind of racial animus. I would agree with Moynihan's assessment that these were, it seemed to me, eminently fair questions, if a bit pointed at certain points. But that is what's supposed to happen when you go out and do media. He didn't call him. I think someone characterized it as though he suggested Ta-Nehisi was an extremist. He didn't do that. What he said was, if I took your name off of this, if I removed all of the rest of the context and we just focused on the Israeli-Palestinian bits, it is so devoid of nuance that it would have seemed appropriate to find it in the backpack of someone who was an actual terrorist, an Islamic extremist. He didn't even deny that. Those perspectives are well represented in the mainstream press. I didn't feel the need to unpack them again here. That was the response he gave. He didn't say, I'm offended that you would say that. He said, I'm interested in giving a voice to the voiceless. I would suggest that Islamic extremists are not, in fact, the voiceless. And I don't think that that's what he meant to say, that he wanted to give a voice to them. But like, it's worth paying attention to the things that Hezbollah, that the people who are actually the leadership of Hamas, the things that they have said about themselves. They say things about how they love death. They love it. So when the Israelis deliver it to them on a platter, they're thanked for it. That's what they want, isn't it? I mean, I find myself as someone who has been just kind of vehemently anti-war in many instances, which I still am. I abhor war. I dislike it tremendously. But it does seem to me that this is not a sufficiently sensible, well-informed perspective. One has to at least be willing to take a look at particular context and do the moral math and evaluate how you got to a particular circumstance and what the future could possibly look like, given the way that the many ways that things could play out. And it does seem to me that a status quo where Hamas, where Hezbollah, where Iran continue to be such huge influential players in this region of the world is one that is just generally on net bad for humanity as in general. It's certainly bad for Israel, but I'd say on average it's bad for people in the Middle East. And it's one of those things that it just becomes so difficult for me to understand how someone can be unflinchingly critical and skeptical of the Israelis and of the Israeli project, and not be similarly skeptical about what a world will look like if Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran are given carte blanche to continue doing the things that they do, because we say, no, ceasefire now. And it's always the Israelis who we expect to abide by these ceasefire, acknowledging that these other parties don't actually care, that they're constantly involved in hurling missiles into civilian populations.
Yeah, they didn't abide by it. And can I just say one thing? Here's what's annoying to me. I hate people who consider themselves Israel experts after 1 year of playing analyst on this issue. There are people with
for a couple of weeks,
lifetime knowledge of exactly what's gone on here, and I encourage you to talk to people like that and to learn. Ta-Nehisi Coates is not one of them. Weirdly, the left in this country and elsewhere has tried to turn this whole thing into a conflict about skin color and DEI type principles, as if on cue. Ta-Nehisi Coates enters to say, yes, did somebody call for me? Yes, I love looking at things through that prism. I'm ready. Writes a book as though he's an authority figure and just kind of says like, well, I'm hearing the other perspective everywhere. So I just thought I'd give you, this perspective as, a DEI expert. It's just so infuriating. Go ahead, Matt Welch.
I have one very important thing in common with Ta-Nehisi Coates that I would like to confess right up top, is that I too have spent 10 days in Israel on a junket. And also I have not recently published a book about that called The Message. I think there's a role for humility in this world, and he's not filling it, as far as I can tell. Calling Israel an ethnocracy just strikes me as odd, with my admittedly only 10 days in Israel level of knowledge, which is not sufficient to make a lot of calls. But there is an Arab minority in Israel, 2 million strong. That's a weird thing for an ethnocracy to be about, right? I don't know that if you look around the region immediately that you will find such ethnic diversity in the surrounding states, or any of the surrounding states. Maybe there are that I'm unaware of, which is possible, but I kind of, I'm taking the under primarily. So it's a very strange thing to put on only Israel. And that's a way also of kind of not expressing a lot of knowledge about, and he does this in the New York Magazine interview, about the founding of states in general. He was like, there should be good founding myths of the state. We have a great founding myth in the United States. Suddenly we like those founding myths. Okay, that's fine. I do too. But Israel has a bad one. The founding myth of England is what? The founding myth of most countries in Europe is they are ethnic nation states with a dominant ethnic nationality, and they still kind of struggle with those things as when that is your primary definition. Even if you're now a modern liberal democracy and you're pluralistic and you respect the rights of minorities, it adds different things. You can count on not many hands, maybe one, maximum two, the number of sort of successful, actually multi-ethnic, multi-religious liberal states. Israel's kind of one of them.
Hungry Root is one very easy way to eat healthy. They send you fresh, high-quality groceries, simple, delicious recipes, simple, that's key, and essential supplements. It's like having someone else do all the planning and shopping, that's the bad part, so that you don't even have to think about it. Hungry Root gets to know your personal health goals, dietary restrictions, favorite foods, how much time you want to spend cooking, and more. Then they build you a personalized cart for the week, including easy 4-ingredient recipes to put those groceries to use. Each order is fully customizable. They've got fresh produce, high-quality meat, healthy snacks, and more. Everything from Hungry Root follows a simple standard. It must taste good, be quick to make, and contain whole, trusted ingredients. Hungry Root right now offering the Megyn Kelly Show viewers 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/Megyn to get 40% off your first delivery and get your free veggies. hungryroot.com/Megyn. Don't forget to use our link so they know we sent you. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.